Organized money.
Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button so that more people can get exposed to organized money. Really appreciate it.
So I remember a few months ago, we did kind of a look at what was happening in antitrust under Trump. And we were kind of surprisingly measured about it. We thought that, hey, it looks like, the work that was done by Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor was kind of holding. And that there was, maybe a new consensus being. And that, I would have to say, has been pretty much shattered. And it came to a head in the last few days. And it basically, it came to a coup that happened at the antitrust division of the Justice Department.
So the people who were, well, there's a number of things that have gone on, but the antitrust has really gone off the rails in the Trump administration. We're going to talk about that, and we have a really good guest. It's a conservative journalist named Sohrab Ahmari. Is that right?
Ahmari?
Sohrab,
or Ahmari? Yeah, he said Ahmari.
Ahmari. Let me. Sohrab Ahmari. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a really good guest to talk about this. His name is Sohrab Ahmari, and he is a conservative journalist and someone I've known for a while, for many years actually. He writes and is the editor of a publication called Unheard, and he writes about conservative politics from a populist perspective and a kind of moral perspective. So he's a moral perspective. He's a religious. He does a lot of work on religion as well. And he broke a story about the details of a pretty corrupt merger settlement that happened in the Department of Justice, and then some firings that took place that, as David just pointed out, amount essentially to a coup of against the populists in the Trump administration.
Yeah, and so he has some great insight on exactly what happened and how this deal is kind of emblematic of a larger culture that is starting to build up in Washington, where if you want to get your problem solved and you're a corporation, there are some fixers out there that you can go to. And he's going to talk about that. It's a great discussion. Here it is, Organized Money.
Sohrab, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
So what happened? Give us a snapshot of the story here.
Yeah, just very quickly, I'll try to do it chronologically. And as you both know better than I, that these antitrust cases can often be arcane and technical, but actually this one isn't all that arcane and technical, so I think it should be easy. Basically, you have two of the three biggest players in the kind of networking solutions market, wireless security connectivity solutions at workplaces, large stadiums, colleges and universities. Those two of the three, those big players are HPE, that's Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and Juniper. And
so this is like you go to a hospital or a stadium or something, and it's the system that lets you get on Wi-Fi. So it'd be like your Wi-Fi router, but not for your home, for a giant thing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
But also all sorts of other complex things where it's like the intra-network of just the hospital that allows its different software systems to talk to each other and that kind of thing.
Okay.
But anyway, so they proposed to merge, and early in sorry, let me start that last part over. So pick up here. Late in the Biden administration, the Biden Office of the Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, which is the Justice Department's antitrust enforcer, began to kind of brief against it, but they didn't touch it. It was the incoming Trump administration that picked up that recommendation and decided to sue to stop this merger under.
Right. And that was very early on, by the way. That was like January 30th is when they sued. And that was before Gail Slater, who is the current Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, was actually even confirmed. So this was the previous acting guy who did this.
Like,
Who's still
give us
there, but
give
is no longer in that
Yeah.
top.
give us a scope of money. How much is this merger? Like, how big are we talking about here?
It's $14 billion,
Okay.
and again, it's there are three big players in that. I mentioned the two who are trying to merge or will soon be merging, HP and Juniper, and the biggest one is of course Cisco. Um, so
So
it,
it's not a small merger. It's a lot of money, 14 billion. It's not like the biggest merger ever, but it's not
no, it
it's
would
a
be
lot of money.
considered a significant, yeah.
Right. Okay.
So there I'm sorry, let me start that part over. So Asafi sues to stop the merger, and then it falls into the negotiation track for a settlement soon after. And that's not atypical, to be fair to them. Like some mergers do go to court, and some where they
Yeah.
fall into a kind of settlement pattern. And that's where the idea is the government, in this case, the Department of Justice, comes up with mechanisms to try to ensure that if the merger goes forward, it doesn't hinder competition to a significant degree, doesn't hurt consumers, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where things get problematic because as the negotiations move forward, and then Gail Slater, who is now the actual Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, takes office, months go forward and negotiations run into trouble, meaning the terms that the HPE, the leading company that's in the driver's seat, as it were, is proposing is not satisfactory to her. And instead of negotiating with her, as she and her staff were begging HPE lawyers to do, one former official kept telling me,
Okay.
we just said, like, just talk to us on the merits. Don't go around us. Why were they saying don't go around us? Because what HPE actually did after a while, when it became frustrated, is it retained a pair of powerful Trumpy figures, namely Mike Davis and Arthur Schwartz, and those figures essentially arranged meetings with figures higher up than Gail Slater, even though she's the Senate confirmed antitrust expert at the DOJ. They went like above her to, it
Hmm.
seems, Attorney General Pam Bondi's chief of staff, a guy named Chad Mizell, and they had smoky, kind of boozy backdoor meetings at which the terms of the settlement were hashed out and then imposed on the office of Gail Slater. Now, normally when people say backdoor,
I think we should stop there and back up and just talk about who some of these people are. You threw a lot of names at us.
okay,
So you mentioned Mike Davis and Arthur Schwartz. Let's start with them. So Mike Davis, interestingly, when this very deal was announced, the announcement to sue in the HP Juniper case, he wrote a tweet that said 3-2, you must sue. This is great. And
and
then
to
he
explain
ends
that,
up
it
being,
means the three big players will become two.
that's right.
So
And
sue to
then
stop that. Yeah.
and then he ends up being hired by HP. Why is he someone who would be coveted by a business to be hired for the purpose of lobbying them, particularly on legal issues like this?
Well, first of all, I mean, he's built up a reputation as a kind of anti-big tech fighter, and not entirely unjustly. He founded something with Gail Slater. There's an element of personal drama in this, which is he and Slater worked on a project together called the Internet Accountability Project, which was kind of the right's answer to kind of attempts to
Mm-hmm.
counter big tech power. And to throw the factual complexity into the picture, Gail Slater very likely has her current job because of Mike Davis. Like he lobbied for her and fought for her.
Right.
So there's like, eh, I
He's
mean, yeah,
he's a powerful guy on the right. You know, he runs a bunch of stuff, not just the anti-big tech stuff. He's something called
Article 3
the
project.
Article 3 project. Like he's known as somebody who's close with Trump. He helps pick judges. Tell us about, like,
In a
he's on
way,
Twitter, he
he's
goes on
like
Steve Bannon's show. He's
he's
like a
like
MAGA influencer,
he's
right?
like a Leonard Leo for the new age. Like
Okay.
Leonard
Mm.
Leo in the first term was the still a figure of the old Republican Party, the old Federalist Party, helping pick judges and stuff. And in some ways, Mike Davis has supplanted that because Leonard Leo is held in odium by Trump, and he's
Sorry,
getting in there.
this is so. A lot of our listeners
Too
probably know who
insidery.
Leonard Leo is, but I feel like some of them won't. And Leonard Leo, and we're just sort of explaining all of these figures who are super important. And if you're a conservative, they're just like, of course you know who these people are. And I'm
Correct.
assuming if you're not a conservative, you may not know. Leonard Leo ran the Federalist Society, which is the elite conservative legal movement organizational group. He is a legend on the right, and he picked a lot of the judges that Trump nominated and confirmed in his first term on the
And
Supreme Court.
you're saying that Mike Davis is taking over a lot of those responsibilities, but while at the
Okay.
same time being hired by businesses to deal with certain legal issues.
Yeah, I mean, reportedly the fee is $1 million for this transaction. That's what's thrown out there. Um,
Mhm.
I should make clear that as I was reporting the story, I reached out to both Mr. Davis and Arthur Schwartz, who is also, I mean, I can just say he's just
Yeah,
like
let's talk about Arthur Schwartz
the
now. Who
powerful
is he?
behind the scenes operator.
He's not public facing,
Not at all.
Schwartz. Mike Davis is public facing.
Yeah, right. But
Yeah.
Schwartz, isn't he Donald Trump Jr.'s political advisor or something like that?
If not formally, then certainly informally, I've heard something
I
like
mean,
that.
he was subpoenaed in 2022. I just looked it up. I wasn't following the Russiagate thing very closely, but I Googled the two of them together, and it said, yeah, Arthur Schwartz was subpoenaed by one of the January 6th committees
Mhm.
as part of a probe into Donald Trump Jr. So
So you
I
have
don't know how much you
one.
trust that, but that they're close, apparently.
The point is, you have one very powerful public figure in sort of these circles, and then one very powerful private figure in these circles. And both of them were hired by Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, along with other lobbyists, to advocate to drop this merger,
Well, to make the settlement easier.
to
That's
settle.
the
Okay,
yeah.
right, yeah.
And they did. I mean, in other words, now we can go into various interesting facts that happen. One is I said that there were smoky, boozy backroom deals. Usually,
Right.
when people say that in our time, it's like a figure of speech. But in this case, I've been made to understand by figures on the inside that there were literal, like, boozy backroom meetings over
Right.
martinis at which the outline of the settlement was hashed out, and then that was what became the settlement.
And then Mizell he's involved in this. He's the chief of staff to Pam Bondi, right?
Mhm.
And here's some things that I've heard, and you can tell me what's true or not, or whether it meets with your reporting. So Mizell's wife is a federal judge. She's a district court judge. She was one of the figures who was in the first term under Trump, uh, recommended by Leonard Leo. She was part of that network of judges, conservative judges who were put into place that way. And she wants a promotion. She wants to go to the 11th Circuit. However, Leonard Leo now out of favor in the Trump orbit. Person in favor is Mike Davis. So if Chad Mizell does this favor for Mike Davis, maybe Mike Davis goes and tells Trump, you know what, Chad Mizell's wife, Catherine Mizell is good. You should put her on the 11th Circuit as a circuit court judge. This is kind of some of the backroom understandings that I've had.
I've heard this, and I know that Laura Loomer, I think,
I believe she did, yeah.
alluded to
But
it
I've heard
in
it separately.
I have not heard it separately, I'll be honest.
Okay,
But so in other words, it's through
right,
Loomer's tweet, which she
right.
deleted. Well, I can get into what I've heard why she deleted it. This is so
Yeah,
inside baseball.
well, Laura. Now we have to see. This is
Well,
the
like let's
problem
get to
here,
the let's
is
get
we
to the
gotta mention
coup.
everybody. Yeah,
Let's get to the
let's
let's get
just
to
and
the
then we'll
actual
explain
coup.
more of these figures.
Sorry. So just for some, I'm gonna keep explaining this stuff. I think the details here do matter because I think this episode is being repeated in various ways, in all across the administration, is my guess, in various guises. And so going into the details of these weird conservative, petty scuffles, but also with corporate money involved,
Quid pro quos.
it does actually tell us something about politics today. So that's why we're going into the nitty gritty of these details. But let's get to the coup, and then let's get to then we'll talk about some of the more of the backstory.
Right. And I think where we're at is, so Mizell says, we're going to do this deal, and Slater doesn't really want to do it, and he overrules her. And then what happens after that?
Well, as this back and forth is going on between the higher ups at the Department of Justice and then the lobbyists and Slater's office, two of Slater's lawyers, senior lawyers, a guy named William Rinner and a guy named Roger Alford, begin kind of making noises which only in retrospect begin to look like they were saying things either in warning or lamentation or both. So, for example, Rinner goes out to George Washington University's at like some antitrust conference, speaking as an official of the DOJ, and says, "We will not do this office will not do martini deals. We will not do deals over
Right.
martinis."
It will
Now,
be
in
a
retrospect, it seems
completely
like
different cocktail. It will not be martini deals. It will
exactly.
be some
It'll be
other
Manhattan.
It will be a less girly drink.
I basically
It will
drink.
not be martinis. It will not be whiskey sours.
That's right.
But what he was basically, again, what a former official helped me understand was that he was talking about something that was taking place and he was frustrated with it.
Right.
So that's so funny. When I read that speech, I thought he was attacking. I thought he was lying about the Biden administration and accusing them of doing that, and I was offended.
No,
and then now I realize, oh, that's kind of funny.
And then he said, Alford at a similar kind of gathering, or in that case, Alford, the other fired official, was testifying before the Senate's, subcommittee on antitrust and consumer welfare, and said that he's worried about a quote unquote network of lobbyists who, hinder the free market in favor of a, narrow set of.
This is funny. This is like prisoners like doing code to try to get their information out.
That's funny. So what happens? Okay,
so basically the deal the deal goes through. Sorry, let's cut my rambling there. It's imposed essentially on Slater's office and gets signed and everything. And
it's put out in like the middle of the night. It's like on a Friday night, and nobody signs it who's a trial attorney at the antitrust division. It's signed by Mizell himself,
correct,
which is pretty unusual, I think.
Definitely unusual. And the two officials are fired. We're recording this on Friday, August 1st. They were suspended on the previous Friday, and then on the Monday morning of this week, which would be Monday, the 28th of July, they were terminated.
Right. And so there's a little delay there. It's like a month, because it was at the end of June when this case was actually settled.
Yeah.
And then I guess the grumbling continued. Why the delay? Why a month between?
No, not a month, a couple of days.
No, it's about a month. The HP Juniper settlement was.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Sorry.
And then this doesn't really flare up until the end of July. So, like, what is happening in that time frame?
It's just the grumbling behind the scenes, the discontent, and the DOJ higher ups get tired of it, especially of Alford, apparently, who's like a Notre Dame law professor, and so therefore has, in a way, he's a legal intellectual and just has no fear. He has tenure, so he just spoke up his mind.
It's very funny, Matt.
So
tell him what's on his wall, Matt.
Well, what did the deal? Well, let's before that, so the HP and Juniper, they have this, the consolidation of the industry is designed to make it so that it's not three players, it's just two players over this complex set of networking gear. And then they do a settlement. What does the settlement say? Like, what's in this settlement? Why is it why does it sorted? Like, why do you think that this settlement didn't fix the competition problem?
I mean, certainly the people in the DOJ who were unhappy about it, one of them called it a fake settlement. One of
Okay.
them said it was a fake settlement. Sorry, my kids are knocking. Just one second. Back. So the people at the DOJ who were uh, unhappy with this called it a fake settlement. And one of them speaking to me on background said they feel that that there was more to extract in terms of at the very least protecting existing users of Juniper's product, which is called Mist, which would be displaced by the HPE version, which is Aruba. These are the two competing products. And then there's procedural issues, and I think the real issue here, to be honest, the major objections are not substantive but procedural from the point of view of people in Slater's office. It's the fact that there was this meeting behind the scenes, or series of meetings potentially behind this. The martini meetings was disturbing to them. The fact that subsequently, in not everyone who was seemingly involved in the negotiations was listed in the Tunney Act disclosures. We can get into what all that is, but Arthur
Yeah.
Schwartz's name as an HPE lobbyist isn't. Now he has, or his, people close to him have reasons why he didn't need to be listed, but take that for what it's worth. So people here, our listeners, I assume, know what the Tunney Act is.
We'll get
Well,
into that.
no, no, we'll get into that. But I
So,
think
but I
the
just
other
want to
interesting thing
I
is,
just want to make one point
go ahead.
about the settlement itself because it's a maybe it's a little bit pedantic, but I started reading the Talmud today, and Jews have been pedantic for thousands of years. So
That's
I'm
true.
just carrying
And
on
let
that
me
tradition.
explain why for 20 minutes. No, go ahead.
Well, so the important piece here is that Hewlett-Packard and Juniper, when they merged, presented a competition problem. And the deal was HP agreed to spin off one particular division
Right.
that was not at issue, right? So
The solution
it
has
was
nothing to do with
called
the problem.
the Instant On division, and the Instant On division sells to small and medium enterprises, not to entities like stadiums or hospitals, right? In other words, it was a fake settlement, and it really is just consolidating the market. In antitrust, you're supposed, if you file a complaint saying, here's what the problem with this behavior is, when you have some sort of settlement or remedy, that settlement or remedy is supposed to correct that bad behavior. This one very clearly did not. And the
Right.
CEO of Hewlett Packard the next day went on CNBC and said that this settlement is, I'm paraphrasing, but he said it's essentially irrelevant to the
Right.
deal. And so we're totally happy because we get, everything that we wanted. So that's, I just wanted to make that clear because it
No,
really is
absolutely.
a rancid deal and
A-
is a violation of the Clayton Act, likely.
And then here's the other part that's interesting. And Saurabh, you had some interesting reporting around this, is that out of nowhere, once this becomes a scandal, there's all this new justification for the settlement. And the biggest thing is that Mike Allen, who's been kind of a man about town in Washington forever, gets spun this column for Axios where he just regurgitates what people told him, which is that, oh, there's a huge national security reason for doing this settlement because yeah, we would have a terrible time allowing HPE to do deals abroad if they're caught up in this merger. Now you actually looked at this at face value, Saurabh, and found it kind of wanting. So talk about that.
Yeah, so the argument is that, and I got a version of this argument from HPE defenders that, look, it won't affect US consumers if HP and Juniper merge because what we're talking about here is not any kind of consumer-facing business or market. What we're
Right,
talking about is sales to foreign militaries, foreign governments, foreign intelligence agencies. And like, who cares if like the Lithuanian military has to pay a bit more for networking services from like an American perspective? And The problem is that that's just like that's not true.
That
As
would be a problem.
as as the DOJ made clear in its initial complaint, these are two of the three biggest providers of domestic networking solutions and wireless solutions for large and lots of domestic entities like, as I said, colleges and universities, state and local governments, government agencies, stadiums I mentioned, hospitals. They use these services and they're customers of HP or Juniper. So if one of them goes away, there will be consumer facing kind of costs and pain because
That's right.
for those providers, whether it's hospitals or universities or whatever, their IT costs will go down, and so they will pass that down to the consumer or the taxpayer.
I, I
So
actually looked
it
up the
just doesn't
10Ks of
fly.
both of these. I looked up the 10Ks of both of these companies, and HPA has a significant chunk of international business. However, the majority of Juniper's is domestic, and that's who they're buying. So they're buying it to increase their domestic share.
Exactly.
Um, and the antitrust division gives an opportunity to the intelligence community to make questions on these kinds of deals, and they didn't do so at the time. HPE had the opportunity to use a national security
Never
argument,
brought it
didn't
up.
do so at the time.
No.
It's just this new argument that gets thrown into DC insiders and they spit it back out.
Yeah. So as you said, okay, so Omid Asafi, that's the acting Trump 2 Assistant Attorney General for Antitrust, the one who launched the lawsuit. As I've been made to understand by people who are inside and in a bipartisan way, when that person files a lawsuit, there's actually a process for reaching out to the intelligence community, national security agencies as a routine. No, nothing got flagged. In its own filings, HPE didn't mention national, in its own legal filings, it did not mention a single thing about national security. Now, it did put them out later and put the issue out there in news releases, but not in its filings to the government. But the most interesting one is the fact that there's the Tunney Act disclosures. Now, the Tunney Act is a Watergate era law because the Nixon administration was seen to try to push through an antitrust settlement that was corrupt, so much so that Congress enacted a law that said there has to be these guardrails of transparency, good faith, and so on in settlement negotiations over antitrust. And one of the requirements of the Tunney Act is that you disclose whenever representatives or executives of the firms in question have any written or oral communication with U.S. officials. And if you look at the Tunney Act disclosures for HPE for the settlement, there is no mention of anyone from the National Security Council, from the CIA, from the Pentagon, from the DoD,
Right.
and on and on. The only people they met with are like DOJ people.
Right. So the
So
question is, how did all these intelligence officials impart to the antitrust division that there was a serious national security concern if they never talked to
Well,
anyone
how
at
were they
HPE?
apprised of the merger in the first
Yeah,
place?
how do they even know about it? So yeah, the whole thing is kind of bogus. But the
And
Tunney Act, I think, is really important. But go ahead, Matt.
no, I mean, I would also say that my guess is that Roger Alford and Bill Rinner, who are the Gail Slater's officials who got fired, if the intelligence world had said, we don't like this merger, they probably would not have resisted, you know, if
Sure.
they would not have resisted saying, okay, we're not going to challenge it or something like that. It wouldn't have turned into this whole drama where there's resignations,
So the Tunney
or not
Act part of this,
resignations, but firings.
firings, yes. So the Tunney Act part of this is really, really important because not only does it force disclosures on the part of the companies in terms of who they talked with, but it puts this settlement in front of a federal judge. And that judge has the ability to not just rubber stamp these settlements, but have an evidentiary hearing, listen to witnesses, take in documents, conduct basically a full disclosure of all of the things that you've been talking about and reporting, Sohrab, but in a much more fulsome way. And this is a real danger to kind of blow up this pay to play system that seems to be, de rigueur in Washington right now.
It is, and the judge who this particular settlement has been assigned to is out in California, is a kind of pro-labor progressive.
He's a
Um,
Biden judge, yeah.
that
I was told went to law school with Bill Renner.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it is funny.
a
It's a
small
small.
world.
Don't worry, it was Yale.
Just a small backwoods college.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is an opportunity. And in fact, so there was another settlement that happened just a few days ago. It was on travel agents, basically, American Express Global Business Travel, and another company called CWT. And the Biden administration, at the end of the Biden administration, they had put forward a challenge to this merger, and it was not settled; it was dismissed, and that's very important that it was dismissed, because that means that this whole Tunney Act proceeding, this opportunity for the judge to look behind this and say, hey, what's going on with this settlement? That is not possible if you dismiss the case voluntarily. And so it was almost like the Justice Department is learning how they can dispose of these cases. And in that case, American Express Global Business Travel was represented by Ballard Partners, which is literally where Pam Bondi was a partner before going and becoming the Attorney General. And the Justice Department had to come out and say she had nothing to do with this, because she said in her ethics disclosure she would recuse from anything related to Ballard Partners.
So would you say that, first of all, there's one thing I didn't, you said I should say it, Dave, and I didn't, but I want to tell the story now,
Yeah.
why I think that Roger Alford's firing was not about national security or anything else. So Alford is someone I've known for, I guess, a while. He was in the first Trump administration antitrust division. I've been around antitrust for a long time, so I know people on all sides of this. He after he got fired, so he went back to Notre Dame, and he put on his LinkedIn profile a picture of his termination letter, which he framed and put on the wall in his office. So I think there's a little bit of pride there.
Yeah.
He feels, at least the indication is that he feels a sort of sense of, I got fired for doing the right thing and I'm proud of that.
But here's my question for Sohrab. So, Matt has relationships with some people on the right. I have less. And we're kind of shouting into the wilderness. But you are positioned as more of a conservative journalist, someone who actually sees these things as they're happening. Do you think the fact that this is blown up to this degree has any impact on what's sort of being built here? Or do you think that, an actual hearing before a federal judge, would that have the potential to derail this process? Or what do you...
But before we get to that, so we just talked about this Hewlett-Packard situation, right? But is this more systematic? Is it happening? We talked about the Amex business travel thing. Is this more than just that? Is this actually a system that's being erected where these guys apply friction to deals and then get a payoff on the back end? And obviously we don't know for sure, but is this a one-off, or is that the kind of thing that might be happening here, that it's being systematized?
Well, I think the answer I'll give kind of addresses both of your questions, which aren't too dissimilar from each other. What I worry is taking place is, and what I've heard is, Trump's a deal guy. He likes mergers, he likes deals. And so figures like Gail Slater and Roger Alford were already this was like a kind of quaint thing to have appointed them. At least this is one version of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And that unless they come to terms with the fact that, most antitrust doesn't matter, it's annoying and it hinders deal making it what's the technical term? It blocks deal flow, as it's called.
There
Uh,
you go.
Unless if they come to terms with that, what will happen is the one or two areas where maybe conservatives should care more about, namely the really, really, really big tech. So talking about Google and Meta, that those will kind of follow the enforcement actions, lawsuits that are already unfolding or in the remedies stage and or could be coming down the road. All of that will fall apart because what's waiting in the wings are just like Republicans who would be in. So like I'm painting a bleak picture here. It's basically what I've heard is like, look, get used to it. HP and Juniper, who gives a shit? Let it move forward. If you really want to pick your battles around Meta and Google. And almost everything else should just be allowed to go forward. And this national security thing is also, I think, is a very, and I've talked separately to both of you about this. So the national security thing is a really nasty precedent because everything can be framed as you know,
Sure.
as national security. It's like, oh, well, what about a grocery store merger? It entails our food security. We must be able to,
Right.
like
Yeah.
Sam's Club, Whole Foods, and whoever else should be allowed to merge because it's we got to fight the Chinese.
Right.
Especially in this crackpot, not to say crackpot, but it's this gin crack way where it's like
Right.
not part of the negotiations at all. But then after the fact, if there's any scrutiny of the settlement, it's like, oh, the CIA said we need it. That's pretty nasty. Like that's a very dangerous thing in America.
Yeah. So, and do you see this bleak picture that you laid out as inevitable, or are there ways that you think it could be hindered at least? And would an evidentiary hearing that says this guy took this amount of money and made this change, would that derail that?
I actually think you two are better placed as like the longtime antitrust people. My picture of this mo comes more from my disillusionment with the Trump 2 administration and the sense that it's just reverting to. So I'm stepping out of the antitrust
Yeah.
window per se and just looking at the broader populist thing. I just see very little of the kind of realignment promise that was possible to glimpse right after the election.
Right.
Given the fact that really the base of the Republican Party is now working class, and there was an awareness of that, and this attempt to at least,
So
give some
Trump's
more.
spelling out the working class promises that he's made. Is that what you're basically
I
saying?
really see that. I mean, like on a more macro level, you look at like what's the big legislative accomplishment? Cutting
Hmm.
Medicaid and like putting rural hospitals under pressure.
Yeah.
In order for rich people to be able to claim state and local tax deductions on their federal tax, like just this sort of like, or just
Right.
just tax cuts for the wealthy, basically. Like,
Right.
um, I don't know. So
Hmm.
with that being the overall like political picture, I don't see this or that legal intervention as having, you know, even if this or that deal becomes is unraveled under judicial scrutiny, the bigger picture is a second Trump administration that it's basically Bush Romneyite, except much less genteel and much more,
Right.
hmm, overtly
Hey,
swamp, much
good
swampier
news.
than the swamp that it
Good
replaced.
good news for the martini industry. I mean, let's look on the bright side
Well,
here.
so let me ask it in a different way. Okay, so let's say so some senators wrote the judge and said, hey, this is bad. You need to look into this, et cetera, et cetera. There's been some media exposure, including from you, about what happened. And Mike Davis and Arthur Schwartz are going to be put on the hot seat, or they are on the hot seat. Is this bad for them? Or is the actual exposure of their role really just a business development opportunity for them? Because now, if you want something in Washington, you know who to go to
Right.
and pay off.
I guess I lean toward the latter because I've gotten to a pretty cynical stage in life, and in assessing where this
It's
administration.
not cynicism. It's not cynicism
It's
to
reality.
believe that bad things are happening. I think it's cynicism to not believe it or to say it's
To lie
inevitable
about
that
it.
it had to be this way. Like
Yeah.
the fact that you're bummed out about it suggests that you're not a cynic. Sorry,
Mm.
it's a pet peeve of mine when people conflate being bummed out about something bad and just being cynical. Because a cynic would say, well, this is how it's always
This
works.
is how
This
the
is
world is.
inevitable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So does Gail Slater, is she the antitrust chief in 6 months? Does she survive this?
I really don't know. I know that she still has the support of her former boss, namely now Vice President JD Vance. She worked with him in the Senate office. I believe based on my overall impression of things that she still has his backing, but that there's this is no secret, and I'm not like disclosing it. She is under a lot of pressure. She's under a lot of pressure, and you know, I don't know. I don't know. I
And
really
and the
don't know, but
question
it's
is,
yeah.
what is her role even if she can be overruled by main justice, even if she's there, is she just sort of a figurehead anyway? So I mean, I think that's one of the larger questions.
Yeah, and I think that's also it's also, I mean, setting aside the figure of Gail herself, like a lot of these lawyers who are doing this work in that office, could earn a lot more in the private sector, right? And but there is a prestige associated with being part of the that antitrust division. But if they feel like they work up cases, they like do all this insane technical work that is entailed in anti-monopoly work, and do all of it, and then like it gets set up, and then some cronyist settlement is imposed on the division, then those people will lose morale and they'll like stick around for a while and then they look for other things, and then you have a even if Gale is there, you have a division that's demoralized. And I see that's a real tragedy, and it's very, very bad for the country. It's very bad for the economy. It's very bad for the worker and consumer. And again, I hope like the people who are trying to be earnest about realignment, I hope they realize how dispiriting this is. And at the same time, I hope people on the Democratic left seize the opportunity to like squeeze and squeeze. I mean, those four, was it four senators, right? Like Warren and others, like why
It's
couldn't
Warren, Klobuchar, Booker, and Blumenthal.
yeah, let that grow. I mean, this is one of those opportunities for economic progressives to point out that Trump's promises on the realignment and populism and so forth turned out to be hollow. Like this should be out there in a big way.
Well, let me give the good news because this is pretty grim.
Yeah.
The good news is that in the courts, there are still a bunch of private antitrust suits, and there are some ones brought by states, and even there are some federal ones, and the judges are ruling in good ways. So the antitrust law itself is actually improving, right?
Right.
Which
There's a
is a
good
big deal,
example.
right? Because it
There's a good
means
example, right? The Epic Games Google case that was just in the last few days. It was, there was a ruling, and the judge completely rejected the arguments of Google and has opened up the App Store in on Google Android phones, kind of the same way that it's been opened up on Apple phones.
exactly. This was in the Ninth Circuit. So it's actually the first big tech monopolization case that has come before a circuit court, which is just below the Supreme Court since 2001, Microsoft. And the
Hmm.
panel of judges, as you noted, which included a Trump judge, sided entirely with Epic Games and made a bunch of important legal determinations that make antitrust monopolization cases much easier to bring and allow the remedies to be much broader. So this is a really big deal. And it's a really good thing. There was another case that was brought by the state of Texas against BlackRock on collusion in coal that just passed a motion to dismiss. there's a bunch of good stuff happening in the law. That said, I think it's really important to focus on what's happening here. And during the Bush administration, the law got much, much, much worse, right? So the courts were saying, no, we don't like monopolization, et cetera, et cetera. So that is important. But it is also critical to recognize now that this is just government by scammer. There's really no other way to put it. This is just, we did that show on multi-level marketing with Bridget Reed. I thought that show was fantastic. And that culture of MAGA, the culture of multi-level marketing is the culture of MAGA. That's what these guys are. They are effectively vitamin supplement scammers. And that's how they operate. And you can sort of tell that's how they operate. And so the whole we're fighting big tech, maybe they're fighting big tech, maybe they're not, but it's totally instrumental for them about, helping them get money in other ways. And if they will fight big tech or say they're fighting big tech and take money from big tech, I'm sure. So what has happened is that there is a new system in Washington where if you're a corporation, they will coerce you. They will apply friction to what you want unless you pay off the right people. And it's always been, for a long time, there's been sort of this passive aggressive way of doing that. It's a lot more overt. It's more explicit. The numbers are higher, and there is no good faith in the process. There was good faith in the process. There was also a lot of bad faith. There was corruption, but there was also places that should. Now it is really different. It is much more. It is just government by scammer.
And it's this private martini culture, right? Where there are ways for behind the scenes with very little transparency, these deals are getting made, and they're based, as you kind of alluded to, on like petty jealousies, social climbing, people wanting positions in one place and trying to get friends to get them placed in another. It's very seedy. It's the swamp, right? It's kind of the vision of the swamp that Trump had, that he talked about on the campaign trail, and it's being put into action. And is that the question is, we're going to get past this era, and and there's going to be this body of law as far as antitrust is concerned in courts. And the question is this culture to supersede the better outcomes that we're seeing in some private litigation and state litigation? Like, what should we, and I guess how can Democrats or whoever is available to take up the mantle, whoever the next administration is, how can they capitalize on what's happening in the courts in a way that overcomes what's going to be a pay-to-play culture for the next few years?
I just don't. I'm absorbing how this administration works, and one of the things that I think is difficult here is really explaining the difference between the way this culture is working and the lawlessness and what happened before. Because saying, oh, they're making deals over martinis and they're doing what corporations want, that doesn't sound different than what was going on before. Maybe they weren't drinking martinis or something. I don't know. But it doesn't, paying off fixtures. So I think the challenge that we have is to articulate what is new and what is different here. And there is an element here of lawlessness that we haven't seen before. I mean, there's law has become kind of a guideline-ish thing for the powerful, and that's been true for a while. I think, you and I, know better than most. I guess I shouldn't say that. You know the details of how no one was prosecuted during the financial crisis. So this isn't like it's not Trump introduced corruption into this system.
No,
but I think
corporate rate
we're
trade deals
people,
are pretty much the same. There's a lot in which this is recapitulating the past.
Five or six or
Gilded
seven
Age
of the top,
for a reason.
Right, and 5 or 6 or 7 of the top wealthiest counties, top 10 wealthiest counties in America are surrounding DC. That's not new, right? That is of the last 20 years. So when our first show was on the lobbying around Google and during the Obama era. But this there is a contempt that Mike Davis and Arthur Schwartz have for the actual law itself, and it's an explicit contempt, right? The Bill Rinner he came from Apollo, right, which is a private equity firm, and he really fought about the mergers, not because he opposed doing weak settlements, because he loves weak settlements. He was mad because he said, essentially, my understanding, and I'm paraphrasing and I don't have a direct quote or anything, but my impression of what happened is, hey guys, corruption is supposed to be passive aggressive. You're supposed to pretend to adhere to the rule of law. These processes, these rules mean something. You should try to use the loopholes. And what I think Arthur Davis or Arthur Schwartz and Mike Davis are doing is they're just saying the law doesn't matter. I don't care about any of these processes. I don't care about the law. Give me money and we will do anything that you want.
And the question is,
I do think that is new.
Articulating,
maybe it's not as, I don't know.
How the question is articulating how that's different, right? I mean, some of it is just sort of salad fork manners. Like, you didn't be corrupt in the right way. And but some of it, like, if there is no rule of law, that is like a really dangerous time for America. So I mean, I think some of it does matter, but it's about articulating, where that's kind of fake and where that is real.
And there's also, I think the core problem is that there's no class analysis on it. So the reason you have a rule of law that applies equally to the powerful and the powerless is because you believe that everybody should have equal political rights. And what that means is you have to believe that poor people and middle class people should have equal political rights to rich people. And the Democratic Party does not have a class analysis. And so when we're talking about Hewlett-Packard and Juniper Networks and Cisco and all the rest of it, what we're essentially talking about is extraction, right? At some level, it's just the super wealthy are extracting everyone else and pushing it upward. This is the physical. This is inequality being generated right here. And the rule of law is supposed to prevent that. And if you have a class analysis, you can say, this is wrong because it's extracting from the working people of America who make this country what it is. But if you don't have a class analysis and you try to go processy and you just say, we're against corruption, we like processes, we want you to use the right salad fork, it doesn't sound credible. And I think that's the challenge, because you can't really, you can't oppose this kind of politics by saying, well, no, what we need are more passive-aggressive liberal billionaires to be in control. And I think it's really the challenge of this political environment.
Yeah. Well, obviously, we have a lot to say about it, and we're going to continue to talk about it on future episodes of the show. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll be with you next week on Organized
Money. Organized Money.
We do this show every week. We bring on a guest. We have wonderful producers. It costs money. It costs time. And we are totally funded by you, our listeners. So if you've already signed up and given us some money, thank you so much. If you haven't, go to organizedmoney.fm/subscribe and sign up. You'll get an email every time a new show is released. You'll get transcripts and video. And if you think we do a good job and you want us to continue and you want us to expand, subscribe. It's not that much money, and it helps us keep going. So thanks a lot. Organizedmoney.fm.
Organized Money.